There's a lot of things that sort of happen below the surface, and we're all we feel it. Like you might walk into a room and you're like, oh, it feels a little bit uncomfortable in here. Or you might go into another team and it's like, oh, there's such high energy here. And it brings something out of you that might be squashed in another team. But being able to call that out and talk about it, that's when that level of awareness rises for not just you, but sort of everyone that you're working with.
Hello and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here to talk about business, but we want to tackle topics that most business leaders tend to shy away from. We believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. I'm your host, Jeff Ma, and as always, I'm here to have those conversations and hear those stories from real people about real businesses, real life. My guest today is Candice Hung, and she's the founder of Lucid Leadership, a boutique leadership coaching business that creates healthy and high-performing leaders and teams who serve a greater cause. She's a certified leadership coach with the International Coaching Federation, a certified Enneagram practitioner, which I love, a mental fitness coach, and an organization and relationship systems practitioner. With over 15 years of coaching experience in professional business environments, she also has 20 plus years of Christian ministry leadership experience. She's worked with CEOs, directors, church leaders, and volunteers, organizations ranging from financial services, local government, hospitality, and early learning services. Candice is passionate about working in the intersection of work, relationships, systems, and faith to empower and release leaders and their teams into their potential and develop thriving cultures. She also serves on the ICF Australasian leadership team and is an ambassador for the Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation, which is incredible. Candice is talking to me all the way from Melbourne, Australia. So it's late at night for me, middle of the day for her. This is exciting. I'm excited. And she lives there with her husband and her 2 kids. So Candice, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining and taking the time today.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for staying up late for this call.
Well, you have kids, so I don't know if it's like this for you, but this is not really that late.
Yeah.
Because when the kids when the kids go to bed, my day starts.
Yeah.
So
yeah, totally get you.
Mm-hmm. Candice, I want to start, hearing about your story, but really specifically, kind of about where your passion sits, where your passion really centered around, and how did you get there? Like, where did this passion come from?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think maybe starting off with a story to kind of illustrate might help. And so this one that I often like to tell people just gives a picture of my journey. So the story is about the statue of David and the story of how Michelangelo created him. And the story is that someone asked him, how did you create such a beautiful statue like David? And Michelangelo said, I didn't create him. He was always in the rock, and I just chipped away at the outside, the excess. And when someone first told me that story, it just opened up my whole world in terms of understanding that underneath all these layers and layers of rock, there lies our potential, our essence, who we really are. And I think very much that journey of mine has been chipping away at the outside. And at the start, it wasn't me chipping away, it was really other people. And I think other people kind of seeing beyond what they saw on the outside. For me, it was them kind of coming in and chipping away the rock on the outside, being able to uncover and exposing more of those layers of who I really was underneath. And I think in that process of transformation and journey, and I think for many of us who are coaches, we often end up kind of serving that past sense or past version of ourselves, because we're just so, we have that empathy. We start to see that, if I can make this change and if I can, come into that potential of mine, then I want to share this with other people. And so, there's been lots of things that have informed my passion today, particularly around, working with businesses and teams and, my background is in the corporate world. But as you mentioned in my bio, I also had many years working in sort of the church ministry side as well. And so I actually had those two worlds in parallel, and working in sort of the church world, in the volunteer capacity, in a faith space, and then working in the corporate side, two quite different worlds. But I realized that there's so much that you can learn from each other. When I was back at work, they're so good with like systems, processes, order, structure, those sorts of things. In the church world, it was all about people. It was all about learning how to motivate, encourage them. They don't have any financial motivation whatsoever being there. They need to go something deeper. And so when I've been working in those spaces for like 20 years in parallel, and so it would cross over, and I'd bring things from the church world over into my workplace, and from the workplace, all those sort of things into the church world. And so over the many years, I started to see that people really want to serve something which I call that greater purpose, a greater cause, whether you're in the church world or whether you're in a corporate sense. And you're starting to see that really, I think, for you guys, bringing that sense of humanity back into the workplace. People want to know that they're making a difference, to move beyond the profit. These Gen Ys, millennials, everyone wants to be doing something that's meaningful and purposeful and really connecting to that. So very much this journey of mine that's helped me kind of shape what I'm passionate about and how I want to help people do that as well.
I love that. Yeah. And I'm curious, is there a particularly large chunk of rock you chipped away from yourself that you find it has equipped you well to help others chip away as well?
Yeah, since we're talking about an authentic leader strategy, and I'm going to be very authentic here as well.
Great.
That look, probably the first 30 years of my life, I thought I was in control. I thought I had everything kind of made, felt like, things were kind of going the way that I wanted to. And then boom, I became a mother. And that was probably the biggest thing. And, I think I did not realize. So being open, my mum actually passed away when I was 12 years old. So she had stomach cancer. I grew up in a family of just all men or boys. Emotions wasn't something that we really even talked about, or even wasn't even really part of it. And I just, to cope, I just locked all my feelings and everything away. I didn't know how to deal with it. No one sort of helped me with that. Only then when I became a mother and I had a daughter of my own, that things started to unravel quite big. And in a way, I was forced to kind of understand the impact of my own upbringing on who I was today. And so I had people that came along that were, a couple of, decades ahead, that could immediately see what the issue was and what my struggle was. But I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't at that stage where I kind of, it's painful, right? When those first chips of the rock come and you're like, this is unfamiliar. Someone's like really cutting at the core of who you think you are. And so I resisted for quite some time, not realizing that I was really resisting. It just was like, wasn't even sort of in my frame of mind. But slowly, these people around me were gentle, kept encouraging me to explore. And when I was finally able to take those first steps forwards and realize, oh my goodness, there's this whole aspect, layers and layers and layers underneath, that I hadn't allowed myself to be exposed to, nor anyone else, then that was when, I guess, the healing happened and the revelations, the self-awareness came. And that's just opened up this, I guess, I wouldn't call it the floodgates, but it's been this ongoing, like, layer upon layer upon layer, going, oh my gosh, there's so much more. Just, even the last few weeks, I've had more of these, like, exposures and revelations of the things that have shaped me, where I've thought, that's just me. But actually, no, there's been external influences or that sort of thing that have caused me to think in a certain way that may not be quite helpful for me. Yeah.
So, Candice, talking about authentic leadership, can you just start by defining what that means to you?
Mm. Yeah, to me, being authentic is really about knowing who you really are, and not the sense of I think there's a lot of people that say, I'm authentic. This is just who I am, and just accept me. This is the way I am. But I feel like that's the sort of the unaware self. It's about being really quite true to knowing your strengths, your challenges, the things that are probably the unconscious part of yourself, being able to bring that to a conscious state. And so knowing that each individual is unique, so having that sense around who you are is different from everyone else. Like, that saying that, be yourself, everyone else is taken. And so I really believe that underneath, again, all that rock, that core, that statue of David, when people kind of discover that aspect of who they are, everyone has unique strengths. Everyone has got unique talents and gifts. And it's being able to own that and use that for that greater purpose and cause. And that's being authentic.
Is there a difference between self-awareness as like a general term and authentic, like what you consider authentic leader and what's needed for an authentic leadership? Are they one and the same, or are there elements that are different?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few elements. I think self-awareness is definitely the beginning. Like you need to start that and be open to knowing that there are things about yourself that you don't know. But there's a lot more other layers of awareness. And so someone that kind of shared with me probably last year, and they're for a group actually in the US as well called 5 Capitals, and they talk about sort of other 5 areas of awareness. And this is what we do like in our coaching as well. So the first one being like self-awareness, so understanding what's happening, being able to regulate your own emotions, understanding what's happening from your side. The next part in terms of, I guess, emotional intelligence is that sense of social awareness. What's happening with the other person. So now you're kind of spreading out beyond yourself, because when you know yourself, then you can almost accept yourself and then forget about yourself, right? So that enables you to actually see what's happening with other people in terms of social awareness. There's a sense of current reality awareness. So really being truthful about what's happening at the moment. There are a lot of people that can be so positive almost to the point of perhaps denial about the current situation, or they're so living in the past that they can't see what's happening today. So it's a real, what is actually happening today, being brutally honest about the facts of, what's happening in your organization or your teams or whatever, speaking that out, but kind of having that unwavering belief that things will be different. So for ourselves, in terms of my faith belief, there's a God awareness, so what's happening in the bigger picture. So if you're a spiritual person, there's this other element. Sometimes we call it sort of like this third dimension that we're not kind of tuned into. So seeing what's happening there. And then there's the 5th one called, I guess, that story awareness. So that's really kind of mapping how has this story, your journey, kind of impacted you today. So I guess, 5 areas that I would say kind of impact.
That's very interesting. I've not heard it broken down into those pieces, but they make a lot of sense. I think self-awareness alone is already quite the journey, and seeing 4 other types of awareness to kind of harness is kind of overwhelming, to be honest. Is this something, I guess, how do you start building these things? Is this something you can do alone? Is this something that you need help with? Is it something that it takes a village? Like where does all this awareness come from?
Yeah, you definitely need a village for this. And maybe whether you call it I've just been talking a lot about psychological safety and having people in your world where you feel comfortable around, to be exposed, to allow yourself to be seen as well. So, I feel like coaching is becoming such a big thing now because it seems like it's one of the spaces where it is safe, where you can get that unbiased, neutral kind of perspective. And it's really hard to find that today, right? Now you got to go like invest and pay someone to really listen to you, because everyone's in a way too busy to spend that time to invest, to really listen carefully without putting their own judgments and their own thoughts on other people. So having that environment where perhaps you have that one person that you can go to, but I think you need to really cultivate that in your small groups, in your teams. And that's why I'm so passionate about teams, because we spent something like 70% of our time like at work. That's like the new family for us. And so having a group of people that you work with that have this sense of wanting to listen to each other, to create that space where people's blind spots can be exposed without a sense of shame or fear or humiliation, is really important. Another aspect of work that I in terms of the organizational relationship systems is this thing called relationship systems intelligence. So that's, I suppose, if you want to add another layer on that, it's sort of like beyond the social awareness. It's starting to look at the network of people. So say like you're working in a team, you start looking at the dynamics and the relationships that happen between people, and that when you come together as a team, it has its own unique personality. It's a unique entity in itself, and it really is pulling back. Like we have to get off the dance floor, right, and be up on the balcony to see things from a widest perspective and to see the dynamics that are in play as well, and to kind of call them out, because I think there's a lot of things that sort of happen below the surface, and we're all we feel it. Like you might walk into a room and you're like, oh, it feels a little bit uncomfortable in here. Or you might go into another team and it's like, oh, there's such high energy here, and it brings something out of you that might be squashed in another team. But being able to call that out and talk about it, that's when that level of awareness rises for not just you, but sort of everyone that you're working with.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're creating a lot of tangibility around some of the less tangible pieces that I think we can all relate to. And that's really, really interesting. And I'm curious about, particularly you were mentioning story awareness, and that's a new one for me. Can you define that or give an example and talk a little bit about that for me?
Yeah, story. Okay, so one of the other quotes that I really love, and huge Brene Brown fan, but she says, if you have the courage to walk into your story and own it, you get to write the ending. So in terms of what that means, it's kind of looking, when you talk about your story, it's that unique part of you, from birth until now. All the different experiences, situations, relationships, interactions that you've had pretty much from birth till now, that is like your story. You can break that up into chapters. If you have the courage to actually go back and examine those parts of your life, you'll start to see that there are certain themes that have happened. There's certain growth, opportunities and different ways that you've perceived those things that have happened. And I think for a lot of us, perhaps we didn't have such a great childhood, or we didn't have such a great upbringing. We had maybe some traumatic events. And what happens is that we kind of lock those away. So a bit like, sort of my past, didn't know how to deal with it then. You might have been 6 years old, 8, 12, 15 years old, and it's like too hard for me to deal with that. Don't want to lock it away in like some dark cupboard, but not realizing that it has such an influence on you today. And so I've realized that when we lock it away, we experience and we remember those things, at the same way as we were that particular age. So if that happened to us at 15 years old, we are remembering it, and we remember all the emotions and things like a 15-year-old, but we need to take it out, kind of examine it much more objectively from perspective of being a 30, 40, 50-year-old. And then we get to change the narrative of what it means and go, okay, that's something that could actually be a positive, could be a gift, could be an opportunity now. But if I don't address it, it's like that sort of mold that's growing in the background, and we're just letting it fester. We need to expose it to the light. So looking at our story, and there's lots of different ways that you can kind of go into that. Sometimes you do need a trusted person that can help you walk through that, because it can bring up some challenging things. Sometimes we need that professional help, to go to a therapist or someone like that to help us walk through those challenges. But there's, I always say, if you don't own your story, it will own you.
That makes a whole lot of sense. I'm curious, if you could pick only one thing, what's like, you walk into a room, you see a leader doing this. What's a sure sign that you have an authentic leader here? Like, what's the one thing, if you could pick, that sets that leader apart?
It would probably be, I guess, a sense of vulnerability, I think, and being able to laugh at themselves. You know, and not like a self-deprecating kind of way, but it's sort of, a lot of people think that vulnerability is weakness. So showing that side of you that is, you know, not so good. But the way I think people then communicate their vulnerabilities, it's not a way of putting themselves down. I think when someone's authentic, they're neither arrogant, but they don't put themselves down. You know, they just almost see themselves as just a peer, an equal. You know, they have such great empathy and compassion for others, and they have that empathy and compassion for themselves as well. So it is one of those things. It's a bit of an energy as well. You know, I said, like, sometimes you walk into the room and it feels different as well. Sometimes it's not always a sense of what they're saying, what they're doing. Is maybe it's their body language, maybe it's just the way they look, you know, the way that they're carrying themselves around the room, the way that they're talking, the way that they make eye contact. And you get an energy, right? That when you come up near them, you just feel that they hear you, that you're valued, and they're open about some of the challenges that they're going through as well. Sorry, I didn't really narrow it to one thing, but
it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to like challenge you there, but you got it. You nailed it. To me, that was all one thing. So
yeah, okay.
Can we talk a little bit about the intersection of authentic leadership and love? And of course, love is broadly defined, but I mean love as a business strategy, love talking about humanity and putting decisions around people first, these types of things that I obviously am biased and care about. But can you talk about the intersection, the overlap, if any, on where you see it? Where does love fit in your equation?
Love is really the core, for me. It's one of those things where I feel as though now, like I said, a lot of organizations are wanting to bring that sense of humanity. They're looking at the soft skills, they're looking at the people side. And a lot of that motivation is because they've heard and they've seen that it produces, you know, strong business results and people matter and all that sort of thing, which it all does. And it's really important that they do. But again, I think if that's just the only motivator, like if it's not actually people are valuable, what if you love these people and you don't get the business results? Then what? You know, do you give up on that sense of love? No, I actually think it's something that should be that core value that almost regardless of the outcome, then we still think people are valuable as they are. And so the very first part is actually then loving yourself. So, you know, I know we talk a lot about self-care and all those sorts of things. It is much more than that. I think for a big part of the work that I do, and for myself as well, is that whole sense of self-acceptance and self-forgiveness. You know, we're really hard on ourselves as people, and being able to show that love to yourself in terms of accepting everything that has happened to you, but everything that you've done as well. Yeah. So many of us will go, you know, they'll live in a sense of regret. I shouldn't have done that. You know, wish I changed that. You know, stupid, why did I do that? But I have this strong belief that everyone's doing the best that they can with what they have at that time. Like, I don't think anyone really intentionally is trying to stuff up their life at that time. And so go back, and again, this is why it's so important to reflect on your story from today's perspective, going, you know, as a 10-year-old, as a 12-year-old, is that really realistic for that particular child to have known all these things and have operated in this certain way? Probably not. And then I think what happens is, there's this shadow side, right? This part of you that, you know, you're embarrassed about, or you're ashamed of, or you don't like, maybe particularly for a lot of people in their teenage years. Wasn't quite like you know, for some it was great. For a lot of people it wasn't so great. Yeah. There's this, like, you know, shadow teenage figure sort of in the background that you don't want to kind of bring out. But being able to accept that person as your, you know, a lovable person, then enables you to actually have that empathy and compassion for others, knowing that everyone else is imperfect as well, perfectly imperfect.
Yeah. So the last piece here, to try to bring this, I guess, down to like a tangible, like graspable level, or an attempt to, because I know this is a lot, but you know, when it comes to your coaching and like the work you actually do, when you work with leaders, where do you begin? Like, what does this stuff tangibly look like? What are the things you're having people do or try? Or, you know, can you give some sense of like what the listeners might be able to be thinking about for themselves? I know we can't, it's different for every person and every case is unique, but like, is there anything that you can offer in terms of what working towards being an authentic leader looks like?
Yeah. So I think at the start you mentioned that I use the Enneagram. So being Enneagram, don't know if everyone is familiar with it, but it's I guess an ancient personality typing tool. Some people don't like using those sorts of things. I do. And I found, like, I actually came across this, you know, a bit further down the track of my journey, but I have found that, I guess, compared to a lot of other tools out there, this one talks to the why, the motivations behind why you do what you do. Other tools are very much static, like they'll tell you this is how you react in these situations. You're extrovert, you're introvert at this one point in time, and so doesn't really give a sense of where you come from, why, the growth path there. So when I came across the Enneagram, I just went, oh wow, this is given actually language to my journey, where I've come from, where I'm at, where I could go in the future. And it was just a very, very helpful tool. So I do use that with a lot of my clients, just to help, I guess, bring about that awareness. And it's not a, you know, let's do 2 sessions and then you're on your way, but it's kind of like gives you a framework, gives you something to be aware of. It's not the be all and end all. I'm not going to tell you everything about yourself, but just gives you those first easy steps into that awareness piece. You can also I use that in a team environment as well. So, very interesting to get everyone in a group together and looking at their styles, how they interact with each other, where you will go when you're feeling more healthy, when you're not so healthy, what it looks like in conflict and that sort of thing. So that's one component. I do a lot of work in terms of that story journey as well. So helping to walk people through that and bringing out the themes and coming up with, I guess a purpose statement for themselves, their values, looking at it's an iterative process. So it's not just a one-time, let's look at your story to today and then that's it. But every new day brings new experiences and you've got to kind of integrate that back into the journey. And then I suppose the last component of what I do is really about building that system of new habits and practices and ways of thinking, because you can have all this awareness and insight and you're like, wow, fantastic. Now what? You really need to kind of build that trellis for people so that these new habits turn into that tangible practices and habits. I love James Clear's Atomic Habits. There's another, programs that I use which help people build those new neural pathways in a way. They get the habits, the practices, they got to work with people together because change is hard. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Change is very hard on its own. Takes 63 days to, of consistent practice to form a new habit. And busy leaders, do a great course. They'll go back into their day-to-day work, forgotten about what they learned the previous day, too hard to integrate it. So really helping them build a community around that to change together, even better if you can do it as a team. You've got that support, you've got the, shared goals, and that's where I'll use things like, apps and technology and all that stuff. Try to utilize all those kind of things to really help build a new way of being, really. Yeah.
Awesome. Candice, thank you so much for the time you spent today, all the wisdom you've dropped. I mean, I've got a lot to think about because I always simplified it down to self-awareness, and I have all this other awareness that I want to uncover about myself. And so thank you so much for what you've shared today. For the record, I'm Enneagram 3, not that it matters, but love anyways. Thank you for the time you've spent today. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in as always. We hope you're checking out our book, Love is a Business Strategy, still available. And subscribe, please, on our podcast. If you're first time here, please subscribe, give us a rating, drop us a note, any of those good things. With that, thank you for all your time. We'll see everybody next week.